Hey, what's up, everybody? Win big in 2023 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code KNUCKLER. That's KNUCKLER, one who throws knuckleballs. So, just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. And hey, Father's Day is this weekend. And, the other holidays like Christmas and people's birthdays, anniversary. If you got someone in your life that loves fantasy sports, look nowhere else than a premium subscription from RotoBaller. Give them the tools they need to come home a winner to you at night. Hold on, let's see if Also, on a more serious note, if you have a gambling problem, and you're still calling 1-800 numbers, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or, quit parlaying 3 different NFL games every Sunday. You don't have to necessarily bet every run spread in an MLB game, which is chaos. You pick a few games every day. You bet $2. You pick some dogs with the best value. Keep yourselves out of trouble, folks. Alabama's coach threw away his whole baseball coaching career just to give his buddy a hot tip. We've seen a bunch of NFL players suspended for a year because they are just betting on crazy stuff like on DraftKings and FanDuel. The internet is a little better at identifying that. If you love gambling so much that you are willing to risk a $3 million salary, maybe you should call 1-800-GAMBLER. And what's up, everybody? This is episode 99 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That, and we are looking forward to UFC Vegas 75 this weekend. And so there's also PFL 5 on Friday night. There's also Bellator 297 on Friday night. Patricio Pitbull is going down to bantamweight to fight Sergio Pettis for that belt. Also on that card, there's Vadim Nemkov versus Yoel Romero for the light heavyweight title. Corey Anderson versus one of my favorites of all time at the weight, Phil Mr. Wonderful Davis, and Daniel James versus Gokhan Sarakam at heavyweight. PFL, obviously, that's every week the PFL is super important, and they got a lot more interesting now that they have Francis Ngannou calling some shots for them and potentially setting up a mega fight in that promotion. PFL, they got Ante Delia versus Maurice Green, Larissa Pacheco back at it against Amber Liebrock, Henan Ferreira, Matthias Scheffel, Aspen Ladd, and Carolina Sobek, Dennis Goldshoff, and Jorgen De Castro. Every week of the PFL matters, and if you want to find my picks for Bellator 297, PFL 5, boxing, and any other MMA events on any given week, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Go to Spotify, follow us and subscribe at the Tap That Podcast. Go to the Facebook page, like and follow Tap That MMA Podcast. Go to the YouTube page at Tap That MMA Podcast. Like, follow, subscribe, favorably review. I don't know if I'll be able to do the chat in the RotoBaller MMA Discord this week. I will be traveling with my wife's family to the great state of Florida. So if I do the chat, I'll be in there from 5 to 6 p.m. or, I'll just be in there throughout the day when I can, talking DFS and sports betting for UFC Vegas 75. And just a heads up, next week, not sure what it's going to look like because we're going to be traveling back from Florida. So if I can get something out for UFC on ABC5, a.k.a. UFC Jacksonville, I certainly will. Check out my USFL gambling content. It's the last week of the regular season, and every game is going to matter for the postseason. And, a bunch of exciting interlude episodes coming. I don't want to drop any fun names just in case, but got some fun things lined up. And with that, let's just get into a couple recaps first. All right, I am now fully caught up on The Ultimate Fighter. Cody Gibson has won easily. Austin Hubbard dominated. And Roosevelt Roberts got his knockout, one of the fastest in tough history so far. I don't blame Conor McGregor for this. The best prospects, as we know, in 2023 do not go through The Ultimate Fighter for the most part to get to the UFC. They get signed out of, feeder promotions. The UFC has had their eye on those guys for a long time and don't want to let them get away. They want to sign them and put them on events. The road to UFC, the Contender Series, there was Dana White looking for a fight. Guys don't want to go to the Ultimate Fighter house, be on camera all the time, away from their families with a bunch of other dudes that they're competing against and fight in a tournament with crazy circumstances, then to get into the UFC. And this group of vets is really, really good that Michael Chandler has on his team. Several of them, I can't comprehend how guys like Timur Valiev and Brad Katona were ever cut in the first place. Other guys like Roosevelt Roberts, Cody Gibbs, you see why some of these guys got cut at the time. Austin Hubbard, but, these are really good vets, and it's going to be hard. It's hard to imagine the possibility that they're going to lose even a single fight this season, but we shall see. And last week at UFC 289, some interesting results. Unfortunately, a no contest with Nasruddin Imavov and Chris Curtis. A fight I thought Chris Curtis was losing, was going to be down 20-18. Steve Ercik got the upset over David Dvorak. That Steve Ercik is going to be a player at men's flyweight. We already know that from the quality of that win. Jasmine Jasudavicius, former Tap That guest, gets a huge, plus 260 underdog upset in front of her home country, Canada, over Miranda Maverick, and finds herself ranked as the number 15th flyweight in the UFC. Amazing, huge win. Not only that, she looked so much improved. She looked like a different animal with different capabilities. Her getting into the rankings, that is a huge victory for Jasmine. I am so happy for her. Eric Anders lost again. If that wasn't reason to give up on him, man, at that point. Predictable loss to just a very well-rounded, competent opponent. Mike Mallet gets the win in front of his Canadian crowd as well. Dan Ige beat Nate Landwehr. Charles Oliveira, as the underdog, knocks out Beneil Dariush in short time. Dude, like I said, there was no reason to believe that Charles Oliveira, just because he lost to Islam Makhachev, that was it. That's all we were judging it on. Had sunk below the level of the number 2 lightweight in the world until further notice. And for Beneil Dariush, I loved him. I was rooting for him. I was really happy to see him get this chance. This was a huge fight and a huge opportunity that could lead to a lot of bigger things. But you look at it and it's like he was on a great winning streak. It started with 2 good opponents. It kind of got a little mediocre in the middle, and the last 2 wins were Tony Ferguson and Matheus Gamrot. Those are impressive wins to get you up to that level, but nothing about that convinced me that Beneil was a better fighter than Charles Oliveira. And so, that's a setback for Beneil. There's still big fights for him at lightweight. Who knows what's going to happen in this division, man? It's kind of the case all over the place. You hang around the top for long enough, you might find yourself in a big situation. And in the main event, Amanda, the Lioness, Nunes absolutely dominated Irene Aldana through the course of the fight. Gets a unanimous decision victory, retains the UFC Bantamweight Championship, and retires afterward. That wasn't a boo. That's more like outrage. But good time for her to call it. If that's what she's feeling at 35 years old. She avenged her loss to Juliana Pena. Juliana obviously upset because she thinks Amanda Nunes is ducking her.
One comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
But, to immediately avenge that loss to Juliana Pena, and it was her only loss since 2014, holding both belts consecutively. Amazing career. One of the greatest combat athletes and MMA fighters of all time. The greatest women's MMA fighter of all time, the greatest female fighter in any combat sport of all time. She is, her career resume is rivaled by a very, very limited few. Now, the question is, as frequent guest co-host Connor Bones Sloan and I were discussing today, it seems like they've been hinting that this means that the UFC women's featherweight division is gone. It's going to be nixed or phased out, and that's a bummer because I love that weight class. I don't care how few women there are that, can be competitive at that top level. I want to see who it is because there's a lot of female fighters out there that are not true bantamweights. They are their best at 145 pounds. And so if there's even two of those fighters that are of a high level that are at their best at 145, I'd like to see there be a belt that would recognize them for being the best in that weight class. It's a weight class that not a lot of female fighters can get up to. So that's another thing to consider. I hope they don't get rid of it, but they were essentially keeping it around just for the Lioness. Fights were either, her defending her belt or, two people fighting in a number one contender fight to see who would fight Amanda Nunes next. So, unless they got an influx of talent, of which there's not a large pool of very quickly, it does seem that that's going to be the direction they go. And as far as the UFC women's bantamweight division, so now it's like there's a lot of possibilities. So Tapology's top 10, counting down, somehow still Jermaine de Rondemy, Macy Chiasson, Yana Santos, former Yana Kunitskaya, Mayra Bueno Silva, Penny Kianzad, Ketlin Vieira, this is where it steps up, Ketlin Vieira, Irene Aldana, Raquel Pennington, Holly Holm, and Juliana Pena. Now, Juliana Pena didn't get to finish her trilogy with the Lioness. She's the only fighter in a very long time, and of this group of people to have beaten Amanda Nunes. So it seems hard to keep her out of that top spot. Holly Holm is, she's getting very near the end of her career too, but, would a win over Mayra Bueno Silva be enough for that to be the next fight? It certainly could, depending on how these matchups happen. Ketlin Vieira is fighting Pani Kianzad. That's going to be a close fight between the number 5 and 6, according to Tapology in the world. Irene Aldana just came off a dominant loss to Amanda Nunes. She's now, 2-2 in her last 4. You have to look at, Raquel Pennington has won 5 in a row. Dating back to 2020, has a win in 2023. Fighters without a matchup right now in that top class are Juliana Pena, Raquel Pennington, Irene Aldana. They don't have a fight lined up yet. Yana's fighting Macy Chiasson. That's not going to mean anything for the immediate short term. It seems like, they would do Juliana Pena versus Raquel Pennington for the UFC Bantamweight Championship, the vacant title. Maybe they want to see how Ketlin Vieira versus Pani Kianzad plays out, and maybe they do this like they did middleweight a little bit ago and do kind of a mini invisible Grand Prix. That would be fun. Those are always fun. Let's get on to this week. And, besides Bellator and the PFL putting on solid events and Bellator doing their best to keep everything quiet once again, and, they have an awesome event happening, 2 title fights, some of the best names they've ever put out there, like Patricio Pitbull, and radio silence. It's so frustrating. How many people can just stumble on to a PFL event on ESPN Plus on a Friday or a Thursday night, and yet how many dedicated MMA fans can be caught off guard by the day, the week, the time, and how to find a way to watch a Bellator event? Bellator does their best to put on cool events, 1 out of every 3 or 4, and they will be damned if anybody is going to watch them or get excited about them in advance. But UFC Vegas 75 happening Saturday at 7 p.m. That's going to be on ESPN and ESPN2 and ESPN for the main card. We got 12 fights. It was 14. 2 fights had dropped out since I last checked. It was Felipe Bunez and Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Zhalgas is now going to be fighting Joshua Van at UFC on ABC 5. Josh Froome versus Roman Kopylov. Hopefully would have seen Roman get another first-round knockout. Randy Barcelos versus Miles Johns would have been a good fight. Johns got hurt. And Josh Emmett versus Ilya Topuria. That bout was rescheduled as the main event on UFC on ABC 5, a.k.a. UFC Jacksonville. We start off on Saturday with a light heavyweight matchup between Modestas Bukauskas and Zach Pauga, the Ultimate Fighter heavyweight who lost to Muhammad Usman, coming down to 205 pounds in his first... No. He actually did have one fight February of this year against Jordan Wright. That was his light heavyweight debut, and it seems to be a much more natural weight for him. Ronnie Lawrence versus Daniel Argueta in a bantamweight fight. Teresa Bleda and Gabriela Fernandez, women's featherweight. Carlos Hernandez and Dennis Bondar at men's featherweight. Bantamweight matchup between Kyung Ho Gong and Christian Quinones. A flyweight matchup between Jimmy Flick, again, and Alessandro Costa. A welterweight fight between Muslim Salikov, the number 18 welterweight in the world, and Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Mata at lightweight against Manuel Torres. Pat Sabatini back in action in a featherweight fight against Lucas Almeida. At middleweight, one of the best names in the sport, undefeated at 8-0, Christian Leroy Duncan fighting Armen Petrosian. In the co-main event, we got another Armen Sarukian in a lightweight contest against Joaquim Silva. This is a matchup between the number 8 and the number 60 lightweights in the world, according to Tapology, respectively. And then in the main event, a matchup of top 5 middleweights who have had their chance. This is a fight of gatekeepers almost. Guys that are hustling for position now that there's been a change at the top of the UFC middleweight division from Israel Adesanya. It is Marvin Vettori against Jared Cannonier. Let's get it kicking. And so the Bellator odds are finally out, I do believe. Not sure. They're not showing props yet, though, which is bothersome. All right. Modestas Bukauskas is the minus 210 favorite. Zach Pauga, the plus 165 underdog. Let's talk about Modestas first, because I'm less interested in him. He is the loser of 3 of his last 4 fights. He's young, born in 1994, has a 78-inch reach, won his UFC debut by knockout over Andreas Michailidis, and 3 straight losses to knockouts later against reputable opponents where he was, obviously going to be overmatched, it seemed. Jimmy Crute, Michael Alexajuk, even Michael Alexajuk, it just looked a stone stronger. I don't know. Maybe people in Europe will get that. Modestas Bukauskas got knocked out by Khalil Roundtree in 2021. He did bounce back most recently, February of this year, with a unanimous decision victory over Tyson Pedro, who did outstrike him 45-44 and get 2 takedowns. But the round-by-round breakdown of that, and that's a little bit of a fool's gold win to me. Tyson Pedro, his 2 wins since December, his only 2 wins at the UFC level since February of 2018 are against Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. Love Harry Hunsucker, former Top That guest, but those 2 wins don't show me that Tyson Pedro is on this meteoric rise. And so I did think that, that win is a little bit of fool's gold, just like Tyson Pedro was. And Tyson Pedro that last time.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
So I still don't know about Modestas. Zach Pauga, born in 1988. He's 6 years older than Modestas Bukauskas. Zach the Ripper Pauga has a 76-inch reach. This guy can also fight at heavyweight. He is a thicker dude than Modestas Bukauskas. Now, he lost in the Ultimate Fighter finale, August of 2022, by second-round knockout to Muhammad Usman. He was outstriking Usman 32-12, but he did get knocked down and finished. At heavyweight, I don't know how that made, because Muhammad Usman leans on his size, way too much. It's all that he has, really. And so maybe, the light heavyweight move is the long term, where Zach Palga's promise really is, and maybe he can move up past the likes of a Modestas Bukauskas, because when in his debut over Jordan Wright at 205 pounds, he outstruck Jordan Wright 59-29 en route to a unanimous decision. Now, granted, Jordan Wright had done a lot of losing before that fight. He only fought good opponents, I will say, and Palga was the only one who wasn't able to put him away. But, that's just as much a quality win to me as Modestas Bukauskas' victory over Tyson Pedro, maybe even more so, because the scorecards and the statistics, or at least the statistics, were a lot closer in the Modestas versus Pedro fight. Well, Zach Palga, really out-volumed Jordan Wright, and so when he was able to do that against Muhammad Usman, he just, gets leaned up on. It makes you tired. You're smaller than the other guy, and he's powerful, and that's a bad combination. So, I think this is about a 50-50 fight. I think, Modestas is the younger guy. I think that, he's fought tough competition, as, that you have to take both of them a bit with a grain of salt from their past. But for this one fight right now, this is a 50-50 matchup. Zach Palga plus 165. I love it. Hit it. And, I don't think that, Modestas is strong enough to put Palga away at light heavyweight. He knocked out Andreas Michailidis, but, I think this is more similar to the Pedro fight in terms of, how Modestas could win it. Either way, I think this fight goes to the judges' scorecards. So over 2.5 rounds, that's minus 195. I don't hate that. Fight goes to decision, minus 155. That's a solid value. Bukauskas by decision, plus 150. Palga by decision, plus 275. I think those are a pretty much equal likelihood outcomes. So hit Palga by decision, plus 275. Next up, we got, let's see, there was a cancellation. Dan Argueta and Ronnie Lawrence at bantamweight. Ronnie Lawrence is the minus 190 favorite. Argueta the plus 155 underdog. Let's start with Argueta, born in 1993. Lost his UFC debut to Damon Jackson by unanimous decision June of 2022. He got outstruck 32-27, taken down 2-1. He won his last time out January of this year by unanimous decision over Nick Aguirre, outstriking him 47-14, taking him down 4 times. Ronnie Lawrence, in the meantime, born in 1992, they have equal 68-inch reach. Started his UFC career counting the Contender Series with 3 straight victories. Unanimous decision victories over Jose Johnson on the Contender Series, where he got 12 takedowns. The unanimous decision victory over Mana Martinez, where he outstruck him 46-39. He knocked Mana down 3 times and got knocked down twice himself, and he landed 6 takedowns. In between that, February 2021, that's when he got his finish, a 3rd-round knockout over Vince Cachero, outstriking him 77-15, taking him down 8 times. So, in his first 3 UFC fights, he landed a combined 26 takedowns. That's more. That is more than 8 per fight. Then, July of last year, crazy he hasn't fought in that long. Lost a unanimous decision, his first loss in the UFC to Sadyukub Kakramanov. Got outstruck 32-15, taken down 10-1. Sadyukub, the only guy that's beaten him in the UFC so far has been Syed Nurmagomedov. And Sadyukub took him down 5 times and lost by guillotine. So Sadyukub can take down pretty much anybody in this division. Look, Ronnie Lawrence has a really strong winning streak on his resume. And a lot of takedowns. And Argueta, found success with his first UFC victory over Nick Aguirre, who was previously undefeated, by getting 4 takedowns. He was on The Ultimate Fighter. He lost to Ricky Tercios. That's not the best indication nowadays. He was at LFA. 3 quality wins at LFA, even after The Ultimate Fighter. and then 1-1 in the UFC. Ronnie Lawrence, I just think that is like so much more dangerous any which way, whether this fight is, ends by decision or if it ends by knockout. That's good news for Ronnie Lawrence. Daniel Argueta has 4 submission wins. He's the one most likely to win by submission, sure. But Ronnie Lawrence has also never been submitted. So if someone's going to do it, I'd say that that's the best bet for Argueta, who is the plus 155 underdog. Go Argueta by submission. That is actually plus 1,100. That might be worth taking a gander at. But Ronnie Lawrence, I think, wins this fight 70 times out of 100. I think minus 190 is a really good value. I think that, this is the way Argueta's fight and, Ronnie Lawrence's fights when he's successful. I think that's how this is going to go. I think he's going to outstrike Argueta. I don't think he's going to get taken down. If he does, he's going to out-take down him, possibly by a considerable margin. And Ronnie Lawrence has knockdown power, too. There's not a lot of places you can feel safe with him. So at minus 190, I think that's an excellent value. And Ronnie by decision, plus 100, I think that's the best prop of the fight. I think it's the most reliable value. But Argueta by submission, plus 1,100, that is definitely worth a $2 flyer. Hit both of them. Ow! Next up, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Teresa Bleda and Gabriela Fernandez. Bleda is the minus 225 favorite. Fernandez the plus 185 underdog. Let's start with Teresa Bleda, born in 2001. They kept making people, apparently, after the year 2000 started. She won her Contender Series fight, outstriking Nayara Maya 50-9 and getting a knockdown en route to unanimous decision, but got absolutely outclassed November of last year in a fight against Natalia Silva, who very quickly established herself as one of the best young talents in the women's flyweight division. It looked like a devastating force against that tier of competition. But maybe Teresa jumps back and looks, super improved, just like Jasmine did this past weekend. But Teresa Bleda did get knocked out by a spinning back kick from Natalia Silva. Gabriela Fernandez, born in 1993, she will be at a 5-inch reach disadvantage. She lost her UFC debut February of this year by unanimous decision to Jasmine Jasudavicius. She outstruck Jasmine 26-24, but got taken down 4 times to 0. I think Teresa is rightfully favored. I think that what we have learned so far from Natalia Silva's opponents is that we cannot judge their losses too harsh. Gabriela, she did outstrike Jasmine, but she did get taken down 4 times to 0. She let Jasmine keep the striking really close. And, that was a fight where Jasmine, really controlled that fight with her wrestling. And, Jasmine can slow a fight down to her pace. And so I don't know if Gabriela Fernandez, with the overall game of Teresa Bleda, is going to be able to keep the striking that close. This is going to be an outcome way in the deep middle in the large spectrum between Bleda's fights against Maya and her loss to Natalia Silva. I think Teresa Bleda wins this fight by unanimous decision. I think she wins this fight 75, 80 times out of 100. So minus 225, probably pushing it, but I don't think though it's worth it there for Fernandez at plus 185. And I think Bleda wins by decision, as I said, by far the most likely outcome. That's at plus 125. Hit it. Ow! And Fernandez by decision, that's plus 450. But that is like her most likely prop. I think it's just so much more up in the air on if Gabriela Fernandez wins this. How does she do it? If Bleda, I think that Bleda could outstrike her, 50 to 28. Maybe even get a takedown on her own, maybe a knockdown. Bleda by decision plus 125, best prop of the fight. Next up, we got a men's bantamweight. No, flyweight. Flyweight is next up. Men's flyweight matchup between Carlos Hernandez and Dennis Bondar. Dennis Bondar, the minus 135 favorite, and Carlos Hernandez, the plus 110 underdog. Let's start with Carlos Hernandez. 2-1 in the UFC, but coming off a loss January of this year by a round 1 rear naked choke to Alan Nascimento, a strong competitor in the men's flyweight division. 2 wins against Daniel Barez in the Contender Series, probably Barez. By split decision, he got taken down 5 times. He did outstrike Daniel 77-52 back when that happened October of 2021. And a very impressive win by split decision in what was an upset, as I do recall, February of last year against Victor Altamirano, outstriking him 84-79, getting 2 takedowns to 1. Nascimento finished that fight early, too. 6 strikes to 3, 2 takedowns. Good night. Dennis Bondar will have a 2-inch reach advantage. He lost his UFC debut February of last year by first-round knockout to Malcolm Gordon. Malcolm Gordon can bite you, especially when he's an underdog, man. Malcolm Gordon, always a sneaky inside-the-distance possibility. Bondar, in that time, though, he's only 30 years old. He has 11 wins by submission. The other 5 are by knockout. So all 16 wins have been inside the distance. The Malcolm Gordon fight, that's his only fight since August of 2020. So in 2019, he had 4 wins against opponents 7-1, 3-2, 1-5, 3. And then in 2020, his last fight before he came to the UFC and lost was to Keenan Jaffarli, road to WWFC, first round rear naked choke. He won the WWFC bantamweight title. Now, he did lose that fight to Malcolm Gordon because of an arm injury. You know, it goes down as a verbal submission. There's an asterisk there, for sure. But, you know, I'm also greatly questioning what Dennis Bondar has done before that fight, before he got into the UFC. I think right now, Carlos Hernandez, he's younger. He has a more impressive resume. He has an extensive amateur record. He's fought strong opponents, international competition. Before Nascimento, his last loss was January of 2017. He rattled off what was 8 straight victories, including Victor Altamirano, including Trevor Wells, a competitor this season on The Ultimate Fighter at LFA 93. So even though those 2 wins were by split decision, the LFA win, the much greater activity level, the organizations he was in before the UFC, all of that makes me think for Dennis Bondar.
Don't do this. You cannot do this, you know?
I cannot comprehend why he is the minus 135 favorite. Maybe I'll be proven sorely wrong on Saturday. But based on what I'm seeing, Carlos Hernandez wins this fight, especially with his ability to steal fights and get close wins on the judges' scorecards. Carlos Hernandez wins this fight 60 to 65 times out of 100. Plus 110. Pick of the fight so far until further notice. Hit it! Ow! And for Carlos Hernandez, how do you think he's going to get it done? If Dennis Bondar makes it through this fight and doesn't get injured, this fight goes the distance, minus 150. And Hernandez by decision, plus 225. What an amazing value.
Ow! Break out the red panties.
And as far as Bondar, I don't know. You know, we haven't seen so much of him in such a long time. If you really believe in the guy's talent, you're willing to look past the amount of inactivity and what looks to me to be a comparatively lower competition level even before the UFC. Yeah, I think you got to believe that Bondar sticks with what, you know, he wins in the way that he always has because he is a talented and skilled guy. How? Submission seems to be most likely, but inside the distance is his MO. Bondar inside the distance plus 300. That is the second best prop of the fight. Ow! Next up, we got a men's bantamweight matchup between Young Hogan and Christian Quinones. Sorry, I saw Zalgas again on UFC stats, and it freaked me out because that fight got moved. Gone is the plus 125 underdog. Quinones the minus 155 favorite. Well, let's go ahead and start with Gong then. born in 1987, has a 73-inch reach. He has won 4 of his last 5 fights. He's now the number 36 ranked bantamweight in the world, according to Tapology.com. Wins over Dana Batjarel the last time out, June of 2022, in a fight where Batjarel landed at 109 strikes, Kyung Ho Kong landed 100. The 3 wins before that, a rear naked choke victory over Teruto Ishihara, February 2019, and then 2 split decision victories over Brandon Davis and Pyongyun Liu in a fight where he got slightly outstruck but won the takedown battle and got some key things like some knockdowns like against Brandon Davis. He's fought a surprising amount in the UFC. Wins over Guido Canetti, for example, but his losses to Ricardo Ramos, August of 2018 by split decision, and a loss to Rani Yahya, November of 2021 by unanimous decision. He outstruck Yahya 43-27, got taken down 3 times to none. Gong got a knockdown, loses the unanimous decision. Wait, I said that was a unanimous decision? All 3 judges gave it to Rani Yahya 29-28. That I do recall that being the way that shook out. But to bounce back with a win over Dana Batjarel, a guy that I always think is more dangerous than he ends up seeming, but I still consider it a quality victory. 4 out of his last 5, that is very impressive. Christian Quinones, born in 1996, almost a decade younger. He'll be at a 3 injury disadvantage. He's on a 2-fight winning streak coming into the UFC, counting the Contender Series. A unanimous decision victory over Zhao Long. He got outstruck 78-76, but got a takedown and a knockdown. That's a great formula for a unanimous decision. Then his only fight at the real UFC level, September 2022, a first-round knockout over Khalid Taha, who has done pretty much nothing. He hasn't done exclusively losing in the UFC, but he has done very little winning. So that is nice, but I don't understand that part. He looked, it was a good fight with Zhao Long. It was really impressive to finish Khalid Taha the way that he did. I do not understand the handicapping of this fight. I think Kyung Ho Kong should be favored. I think this line should be flipped. Gong is the minus 155 favorite. I think he wins 65 of these fights out of 100. So at plus 125 all day. There's some interesting handicapping this week, and I like it. His last 3 wins in the UFC have been by decision. His last 4 fights have gone to decision. 5 out of the last 6, 4 out of the last, actually 4 of the last 5 wins have all been by decision. So, I think that is the most likely outcome with his skill set for sure. But this is a guy that gets knockdowns. Just not, finishes as often as it would seem based on, his recent statistical output. Has Quinones ever been knocked out? 2 times he's been knocked out, 1 time been submitted. He has never lost on the judges' scorecards. That is very interesting. He has 10 wins by knockout. I think that's probably the most likely way that Quinones ends up winning this fight, is if the talent is for real, his upward trajectory of being almost a decade younger is real too. Kyung Ho Kong is, plateaued at a certain level. If you believe in that, then Christian Quinones by knockout, that could happen. And Quinones, Gong has not lost by any other way than decision in the UFC. So it would have to be Christian Quinones for the first time, and, that's possible. Batjarel, isn't like a super strong candidate for that. He hasn't necessarily fought guys that put you away like that. So, plus 125 for Kyung Ho Kong. That is amazing. I love it. That's my second favorite, or tied for my favorite underdog of the card so far. Quinones by knockout. Plus 300. That is a worthy value. Solid rewards for the most likely way that Quinones wins this fight. Gong by decision, for some reason, it's not there. I don't understand why they don't have that. But you do the math. Kyung Ho Kong, plus 125. Conservatively, by decision, even at plus 150, that is a tremendous value. it might be my favorite because I think he wins the considerable majority of these fights, run back 100 times. But maybe Quinones, value-wise, plus 300 for the knockout, is the best prop of that fight. Hit that. Next up, we got a men's flyweight contest. Again, a lot of action going down to 125 pounds over the last few weeks. Alejandro Costa and Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick, the plus 200 underdog, rightfully so, and Alessandro Costa, the minus 250 favorite. I'm giving Jimmy Flick a lot of flack right now.
Don't do this. You cannot do this, you know?
So let's start with him and see if I'm wrong. Jimmy Flick. Why do I keep thinking that he's so much worse? I think record-wise, and it's always like I mix up Jimmy Flick and JP Baz is the real problem. But we did learn something about Flick his last time out because he started off with 2 straight submission victories at the UFC 11 in the Contender Series over Nate Smith and against Cody Durden. But his last win was December of 2020. And he was getting outstruck 21-6, taken down twice by Durden. He ends up getting the triangle choke. That is impressive. His last time out, though, coming back after quite a layoff, about 2 years, January of 2023, this year, he gets knocked out in the first round by Charles Johnson, who was really feeling himself at the time.
Break out the red panties.
Outstruck him 34-7, got one takedown, knockout TKO in the first round. Alessandro Costa will be at a 1-inch disadvantage, but he is 6 years younger. He won his Contender Series debut by split decision. Got outstruck by Juan Andres Luna, 49-45, but got a knockdown. That got it for it on the judges' scorecards. 29-28. 29-28 and 30-27. Adelaide Berg gave it to Juan Andres Luna, 29-28 in that one. Last time out, got knocked out in the third round by one Amir Albazi, December of 2022. Got knocked down twice by Albazi. Outstruck 37-17, taken down once. Still made it to the third round. Didn't get put away in the first. And, Albazi has now won 5 fights in a row, including a win over Kai Kara France, June of 2023, a couple weeks ago by split decision, a fight that he totally did not win. Kai Kara France should have won that fight, but that's 5 straight wins. And he proved that he can hang with Kai Kara France regardless of what I think about that decision. So I think Costa's loss to Albazi means just a little bit more. Flick has some solid wins at the UFC level, but they were a while ago. And I don't know what that means. Costa, we haven't gotten to see as much of him. But I think that Costa could do to Jimmy Flick kind of what Charles Johnson did. Maybe this fight goes a little longer. Maybe Costa has his struggles against Jimmy Flick. Maybe he's even close to getting submitted at a certain point. Jimmy Flick is maybe the more likely guy of the two, maybe, to get a takedown. But Albazi only got Alessandro Costa down, once. And, that's the only takedown that has been gotten against Alessandro Costa. If Costa wants this to stay on the feet, that's a fight I think he's going to win against Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick's going to want to get this down to the ground. And I'm not sure that he'll be able to do that with the disadvantage that will be there on the feet. So, once again, now I'm going with a pretty heavy favorite here. Alessandro Costa, minus 250. Maybe Jimmy Flick is a slightly better value. Maybe when you get to the prop here. I'm not touching a straight-up victor here because I think Costa wins this fight like 65, 75 times out of 100. That's not, enough of a safety net for minus 250. And Jimmy Flick, it's not enough reward for me at plus 200. It's getting close. Costa, how he wins this fight is by decision to me. Again, I think he outstrikes Jimmy Flick and stays off the ground. Maybe he drops one round, but I think that's Costa's most likely route to victory. By decision, that's plus 400. Hit it. But if you want to take a flyer on Jimmy Flick by submission, plus 350 for the plus 200 underdog, that is the best prop of the fight. That is the best value. That's the most likely individual outcome to me. Even though Costa has never been submitted in his career. He's been knocked out twice and lost one decision. Jimmy Flick is a very talented grappler. I think that he could be the one to do it. Next up, we got a men's welterweight matchup between Nicholas Dalby and Muslim Salikov. Salikov is... Where is that? Are they not going to have this? Why?
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
Okay, well, right now, nope, because it was supposed to be, I cannot find odds of all things just for Nicholas Dalby. Okay, we proceed anyway. Nicholas Dalby and Muslim Salikov. I am assuming that Muslim Salikov is going to be a pretty considerable favorite here. So let's start with Nicholas Dalby. Winner of 3 of his last 4, including a win over Daniel Rodriguez and 2, very hang-aroundable, all-right opponents in Claudio Silva and Warley Alves. Those were all by decision. His last 5 wins in the UFC are by decision. He had a loss in between to Tim Means by unanimous decision. He slightly outstruck Means. This is the problem with Dalby sometimes. I think he has to really outdo your volume sometimes. But then, in the fight against Daniel Rodriguez, he gets outstruck 83 to 50, gets the unanimous decision. Nicholas Dalby is just kind of a curious case. He wins a decision over Claudio Silva when he gets taken down 4 times, outstrikes Warley Alves 119 to 70 to 66. It was on, and gets outstruck that much by D-Rob, but still wins the fight on all 3 judges' scorecards. It's only in a guy with superior striking ability and striking form and the whole package, like Tim Means, that can keep the volume close, neutralize everything else, and walk away with that on the judges' scorecards. He had a bad start, Dalby did, to his UFC career, which started in May of 2015. But, since November of 2020, when he's won 3 of his last 4, going pretty good. Born in 1984 with a 74-inch reach. Muslim Salikov, also born in 1984, he will be at a 4-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. He's almost 40 years old. He is the king of Kung Fu. And he is the winner of his last 6 of 7 fights in the UFC. That's a 6-2 record since he started in November of 2017. He hasn't fought in 2023. He had 2 last year. Started with a knockout loss to Yi Jiangliang. Quite an understandable loss. It made it pretty competitive. Competitive enough to where it wasn't embarrassing for sure. That winning streak was against Ricky Rainey, Nordine Talib. Those were 2 knockouts. And then the decision started against Loriano Storiopoli, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, and Francisco Trinaldo. Guys he beat, in two similar ways for Trinaldo and Staropoli. He outstruck them 62 and 63 to 39 and 42, and took them down a combined 5 times. He gets the split decision against Elizeu, even though he gets outstruck 46 to 40, no knockdowns, no takedowns, and gets it on 2 out of 3 judges' scorecards. And his last time out, November of 2022, gets a 3rd-round knockout victory over Andre Fiallo. He was outstriking 56 to 17 with 1 takedown at the time. Fiallo has now lost 3 in a row. He, had some momentum against Miguel Baeza and Cameron Van Camp, but since then he's gotten finished in 3 straight fights in the 2nd and 3rd round against pretty good opponents, granted. So Muslim Salikov is at least, slightly above that level. And Nicholas Dalby's kind of the opposite, kind of like, he's set a baseline. And there's a point I don't know if he can go, against and win. Here's the problem, and why I have to think Muslim Salikov is going to be the favorite here, and why I am favoring him, is the statistical versatility, the well-roundedness. If you can, land 60, 56 strikes with, some power as he put on Andre Fiallo, you can get anywhere from 1 to 3 takedowns. You can win a fight if you get slightly outstruck, but you can, almost double up your opponent on the feet. Those are all things that I think is going to be too much for Nicholas Dalby. Muslim Salikov is of a skill level and of a talent level, even at this age, the same age as Dalby, that I think it's way closer to Tim Means than it is to Warley Alves. Muslim Salikov wins this fight by decision, outstriking Nicholas Dalby, probably like, I don't know, it could be like 50-30, 60-42, somewhere in that range. Maybe he gets 1 or 2 takedowns. I don't think he puts it away. I can't find the odds, but I do think that Muslim Salikov wins this fight about 65, 70 times, maybe 75 out of 100. Prop-wise, I think that Dalby has a little bit more of a sure route to victory. I think if Dalby wins this fight, it is by decision in a wonky statistical result. Muslim Salikov, I think that is his most likely outcome to victory against Nicholas Dalby. But, I don't think you can rule out knockout with the way that he has been fighting since June of 2021 when he started knocking people down and landing with power. So depending on what those numbers are, Salikov by decision, Salikov by TKO knockout, Dalby by decision. I think those are all the best values that you're looking for in that matchup. Next up, we got Manuel Torres and Nicolas Mata. Manuel Torres is the -185 favorite. Mata the +150 underdog. It's a lightweight fight. Let's start with Mata, winner of 2 of his 3 UFC fights. A Contender Series victory by unanimous decision over Joe Lowry, where he got outstruck 54-42, and to win his last time out September of last year, a first-round knockout win over Cameron Van Camp. People were doing that to Van Camp at the time. And how do you hold it against him? His only loss in the UFC, February of 2022, a second-round knockout to Jim, the legend, the everything that you can say for how long he's been in the UFC and who he's fought, Miller. Now let's talk about Manuel Torres, because Nicolas Mata, born in 1993, has a 70-inch reach. Manuel Torres, born in 1995, he will have a 3-inch reach advantage. He has won 2 straight fights coming into the UFC through the Contender Series, a first-round dominant knockout victory over Colton England, October of 2021. May of last year, another first-round knockout over Frank Camacho, outstriking him 34-16. Okay. Mata got knocked out by Jim Miller not even that long ago. I know that Jim Miller has a lot left in him. He's an incredibly skilled, gritty, tough animal dude. But Manuel Torres is on his way up. Nicolas Mata, he's born in 1993. It's not like he's super old. But the wins against Joe Lowry and Cameron Van Camp do not mean much to me at all. Even with the loss to a guy like Jim Miller, the way that Manuel Torres has come into the UFC guns a-blazing, with volume and power, smelling blood in the first round, 2 straight fights in the UFC. Torres being the -185 favorite, I think that's fair. I think he wins this fight about 70-75 times out of 100. If I was touching a straight-up winner here, I would feel okay with Manuel Torres -185. Nicolas Mata, if he wins this fight, I think that... I think maybe whoever wins this fight is going to end up doing it maybe by knockout. Mata's 9 of his pro career wins are by knockout. That's been a lot less lately since he's gotten to a higher level of competition since around 2019. So I'll actually say Mata by decision is his most likely route to victory. That's +800. That is worth a sniff. Sniff it. Ow! But Torres by TKO knockout, I think that is considerably the most likely single outcome of this fight. That's +150. I think that's how you think Manuel Torres wins this fight anyway if he wins it. So you're essentially getting Manuel Torres to win at the price of a moderate underdog of +150. That is my favorite prop of the fight. Hit it. Ow! Next up, we got Lucas Almeida against Pat Sabatini at featherweight. Pat Sabatini is the -200 favorite. Almeida the +165 underdog. So let's start with Almeida. 1-1 in the UFC, a Contender Series victory by unanimous decision. He got outstruck 115-96 and taken down once by Daniel Zellhuber. He lost that Contender Series fight by decision, but then comes into the UFC June of 2022, gets a third-round knockout victory over Michael Trezano, who he pieced up to the tune of 75 to 31 on the feet, 2 knockdowns to 1, en route to an inside the distance finish. Pat Sabatini, 1 year older, 1 inch less a reach. He won 4 in a row coming into the UFC from April of 2021 to April of 2022. It was a fast year in 2021. So 4 wins in a calendar year, 3 by decision against Tristan Connolly, Tucker Lutz, and TJ Laramie. And against Jamal Emmers in August of 2021, he gets a round 1 heel hook. So that was the lone, inside the distance victory in the UFC. The way he won those 3 decision victories against pretty solid opponents, I will say, in Connolly, Lutz, and Laramie, keeping the striking close. If he can't outstrike you, keeping it very close, and landing volume takedowns, especially his last 2 victories. He hasn't gotten a knockdown, since his UFC debut at UFC 261. So I don't think that that's necessarily the route that this goes. He did get knocked out his last time out, September of 2022, UFC Fight Night Sandhagen vs. Song, in the first round by Damon Jackson, very early. Thing is, man, Lucas Almeida hasn't fought anybody the kind of animal like Pat Sabatini who can land, 5, 6 takedowns in a fight. And Almeida only has 1 loss on his record, 32 years old. It was in that Contender Series fight. I'm just not super impressed with his resume coming into the UFC. That's a mistake that I've made before. Sure, only a few opponents, on that resume with, double-digit wins or 9 when he fought them. It was in Jungle Fight. He had a lightweight title there. I always like to see that. And the fact that, he got the win over Mike Trezano, who was 31, had some UFC victories under his belt. That's a meaningful win to me, for sure. Pat Sabatini, though, his loss to Damon Jackson, who's now 21, 4-1. Damon Jackson had won 4 in a row before his loss to Dan Ige by knockout in January of this year. So Damon Jackson looking very strong, and he's fought a lot of good fighters, since 2020 when his activity level picked up and he made it to the UFC. And he's fighting Billy Quarantillo next. That's fun. Lucas Almeida, solid guy. I think that's good. I like Daniel Zellhuber. I do. I just think Pat Sabatini just has a little bit more here. Just a little bit more, and Lucas Almeida just a little bit too unproven. Sabatini might be 17-4, but, what is it? 4 of those wins are in the UFC, and the loss was to a very strong opponent. Pat Sabatini minus 200. I think he wins this fight like 75, a hard 75 times out of 100. So at minus 200, I'm not touching him. I don't think the rewards are there, or my belief or confidence level in Almeida is there to like him at plus 165. Not touching anybody straight up, but let's pick a route to victory. How does Lucas Almeida get it done? I think he gets it done by knockout. The way that he got his UFC win, the way that Pat Sabatini just got finished. I think that's the most logical conclusion there. I think it's the way that he's going to have to fight and approach Sabatini to be able to come out victorious. Almeida by TKO knockout plus 350. That is aggressively all right. I like that, but I just don't feel a lot of stuff about Lucas Almeida. Pat Sabatini by decision, which is how he's won 3 of his 4 wins in the UFC have come by decision. His other one was by submission, and that's the only way that Lucas Almeida has ever lost in his career was by decision. Sabatini by decision, keeping the striking close, maybe 32-16, maybe even on the striking, 32-29, 32-33, whatever it is. I think he gets the more meaningful strikes, gets the takedowns, controls the fight, controls the overall game, gets it on the judges' scorecards, and that is priced at plus 175. My favorite prop of the fight. Hit it. Ow! Next up, we got the first Armen, that is Petrosian against Christian Leroy Duncan. CLD is the minus 165 favorite. Petrosian, the plus 135 underdog. Let us start with Christian Leroy Duncan. Came in hot to the UFC March of this year at UFC 286, which was, of course, in London, in front of his, home country, people rooting him on. That shouldn't be, ignored. He does have a 79-inch reach, born in 1995 for this weight class. His win was against Dusko Todorovic very quickly in the first round, 9 strikes to 4. And I actually think, wasn't that the fight where Dusko got injured? Isn't that what actually happened? But it was an injury, but that's why it went down as a knockdown. And Christian Leroy Duncan was super disappointed. But people love this guy, and I loved him going into the UFC at 8-0. His physique, his range. Was in Cage Warriors, a very reputable organization, has gotten a lot of fights in at that level since the year 2020 and his pro career started, has a huge amateur record where he's fought a lot of guys at the UFC level. And, his last 3 fights before coming into the UFC, from December of 2021 to November of 2022, all inside the distance victories against a 10-5 Justin Moore, an 8-0 Djati Milan, and a 10-2 Marian Dimitrov in Cage Warriors for their middleweight championship. That is impressive. Now let's talk about Armen Petrosyan, winner of 3 of 4 fights in the UFC. He was born in 1990 as a 71-inch reach, and what was CLD's 79? That is impressive for 185 pounds. Petrosyan wins over in the Contender Series by first-round knockout Kellyan Kolev back in October 2021. Then at UFC Fight Night, Makhachev vs. Green, February of last year, beats Gregory Rodriguez, outstriking him 127-61, did get taken down twice, gets a split decision. Then runs into a guy that a lot of people took lightly, underestimated, and got beaten by as he climbed the middleweight rankings. That's a dude by the name of Cal Borrello. Back in July of 2022, he lost to him by unanimous decision. He outstruck him 31-12, but he got taken down 4 times to 0. Cal controlled the fight and slowed down the pace to where it was his universe. And then the last time out, October of last year, unanimous decision victory over AJ Dobson. Outstruck him 118-58, did get taken down 3 times. So here's my concern. Between Kolev, Rodriguez, Borrello, and Dobson, 3 of fights that he won. He got taken down a combined 12 times throughout those 4 fights. He knocked out Kolev in the first round. In the 2 decision wins that he got, he landed a combined 245 strikes and got decision victories. It was only Cal Borrello who was able to take him down, control him, and slow the fight down, who held him very low, below that through 3 rounds to 31 strikes when he landed 20 before he knocked out Kolev in the first round in the Contender Series. Oh, man. Dude, I would love to go Christian Leroy Duncan. I think that guy's going to be a lot of fun. I just think this is an incredibly hard matchup for him. After such a weird UFC debut, a really disappointing fight that people, he couldn't have walked away happy with. It very deflating in front of your home London crowd. He's fought really good guys in Cage Warriors, but he is untested at this level, and Petrosyan is definitely not untested at this level, and he got his wake-up call against Cal Borrello. Petrosyan, I don't think, Leroy Duncan, maybe he wants to take this fight to the ground. I don't think so. He's going to have the reach advantage. I just think that, Petrosyan has done way too much against strong opponents, lost to too good of an opponent, for me to call him a plus 135 underdog here. I think this is almost pick'em. I think this is about a 50-50 fight. Maybe I give a slight edge to CLD for the upward trajectory, but that close, plus 135, hit it. Ow! And what was the other point? I mean, for DFS purposes, I don't think that, maybe it was Cal Borrello's length, because he did have, he does have a long reach. But so did AJ Dobson. He had a 76-inch reach. Gregory Rodriguez, 75. It's not necessarily the reach that's going to get you. It's not necessarily going to stop him from landing triple-digit strikes. So for DFS purposes, my God, at the low price you'll get Petrosyan at, you're definitely going to want a piece of that. Prop-wise, Petrosyan won his last 2 fights by decision. He knocked out a relatively weaker opponent in Kolev at the Contender Series level. CLD, with that guy is where you're looking to go inside the distance. 6 career wins by knockout, 1 by submission, 1 by decision. That decision win came like 4 or 5 fights ago in June of 2021. So I think that, maybe you don't have to do CLD inside the distance. I think the rewards will be there. By TKO knockout, plus 175. Hit it? Sure. That's a solid value, but why I paused is because Petrosian or CLD inside the distance, I'm seeing that at like plus 160, plus 175. If you can get it's so close, and with the fact that he has a submission on his resume, and the fact that Armen can get taken down enough, if he gets hurt and, CLD, takes him down or knocks him down and just wants to go for whatever is the easiest path to an inside the distance victory, very possible. So if you see plus 160 up to plus 175 for CLD inside the distance, the same rewards you're getting to narrow it down for CLD by TKO knockout, absolutely hit that. And Petrosian, I think by decision plus 250, I think that is your best bet for how he ends up winning this fight. I think it's by far the most likely outcome for him. But because of how little we've seen CLD, for how weird the last fight was, even with the level of competition he's been at before this, Petrosian plus 135 is plenty for me. But by decision is his best bet prop-wise for that fight. Next up, we are on to the co-main event. We got Armen. So is that what the co-main event is? I'm flabbergasted by the lack of continuity between different internet sites. That is the co-main event. Joaquim Silva and Armen Sharukian, the second Armen on the card, different spellings, in a lightweight co-main event. Joaquim Silva, the plus 675 underdog. Sharukian, the minus 1,100 favorite. This wasn't a cancellation or anything. This is the matchup they made. Sharukian is ranked 8th in the world at lightweight, I repeat. And Silva is ranked number 60 according to Tapology.com. So what the hell? Let's start with Silva. 1 win in his last 3 fights in the UFC, and that dates back to August of 2019. Loser of 3 of 5 fights dating back to January of 2018. He came into the UFC with 3 straight victories. And his only wins since then are against Jared Gordon by 3rd round knockout and Jesse Ronson by 2nd round knockout. In between, a unanimous decision loss to Vink Pichel. He got outstruck 60-45, taken down 1 time. A 2nd round knockout loss, August of 2019 to Nasrat Haqparast. He got outstruck, he got knocked down, he got finished. Same thing happened against Ricky Glenn over 2 years later in 2021, a 1st round knockout. And then his last time out against Jesse Ronson, he righted those wrongs of his inactivity, the hiatus, and the losing with a 2nd round knockout. But guess what? Jesse Ronson has had 6 fights at the UFC level from 2013 to October of 2022. Not a single win among them. The only non-loss is a no contest against Nicholas Dalby, a fight that he was supposed to win. I think that's what the overturning was. He fought good guys, but Jesse Ronson is not a victory to convince me that you're of a top 30 level, let alone a top 10 level. Sarukian will have a 3-inch reach advantage. He is 7 years younger. His nickname is Ahal Kalakets. I don't know what that means, but I bet it's something pretty intense in the language that he speaks, which is Armenia. He is Armenian. Love to see that. Love to see countries from all over the world in the UFC. Let's talk about Sarukian. Winner of 6 of his last 7 fights. Coming off a win, a unanimous decision victory over Damir Ismagulov. He got outstruck 36-34, but got 7 takedowns, unanimous decision, December of 2022, on a Jared Cannonier fight night, coincidentally. His only loss in that time, and I'll get to this, because his winning streak included 3 unanimous decision victories over Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Davy Ramos, and Matt Frivola. He pieced them up in the striking. He dominated those guys everywhere when those fights happened. Then in September of 2021, started with a streak of 2 straight knockouts against Christos Giagos and Joel Alvarez. He dominated those guys too, really shut them out offensively. Then he gets a big fight in a main event of a fight night, June of last year, against Mateusz Gamrot. He outstruck Mateusz 95-81. He got a knockdown. He got taken down 6 times to 1. The judges' scorecards on that fight went... Wait. That doesn't make any sense. That was a unanimous decision loss. That is unbelievable. He didn't get one judge's scorecard. Every judge gave it to Mateusz 48-47. I did not think that Mateusz won that fight. So I've taken every Mateusz fight since then with a grain of salt. I think Armen should be on a 7-fight winning streak since he lost his debut. To who? April of 2019 by unanimous decision. A guy named Islam Makhachev. His only 2 losses in the UFC are to Islam Makhachev and Mateusz Gamrot. This is a true top 10 fighter in the UFC lightweight division. Silva is not. And how does Silva win this? Or how does Sarukian win this fight? It could be by decision. You know, I think Sarukian wins this fight 85 to 90 times out of 100. I'm not touching a straight up victor here. It's because it's so crazy spread out. Sarukian by decision plus 325. That's all right. Sarukian, 2 of his last 3 wins are by knockout. Joaquim Silva is below Demiris Magalov to me. So I don't think, I think Silva is closer to Joel Alvarez and Christos Giagos than he was Frivola or Davy Ramos or Olivier Aubin-Mercier, the way that those guys were 2-3 years ago. If Silva wants to win this fight, it is going to probably have to be by a knockout because he's not going to be a better fighter than Armen over the course of 3 rounds. So, Silva by knockout plus 1,600. If you're taking a flyer in this one in a co-main event, go with that one because that offers a ton of rewards and it's the only way Silva's going to, it's the way he's going to have to win, I think. Sarukian by TKO knockout minus 135. One more time. Sarukian. Silva. That's hard to call. I don't know. I think plus 325 for Armen by decision and minus 135 for a TKO knockout. I think those are about of equal value. Go with whatever you're feeling there. I think if you're going with recency for the both of them in a composite, you got to go Armen by TKO knockout as the most likely of those outcomes. I guess that's my tiebreaker. And we are now on to the main event of the evening.
Break out the red panties.
A middleweight contest between Marvin Vettori, Tapology's number 4 middleweight in the world, and Jared Cannonier, the number 3 middleweight in the world. The top 5 currently reads Sean Strickland, Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier, Robert Whittaker, and Israel Adesanya. Alex Pereira is going up to fight Jan Blachowicz at light heavyweight. Alex Pereira might be able to fight at 300 pounds. Who knows? Who knew that middleweight was only the surface for him in getting MMA hardware? Very impressive. But there's a lot of stuff to get shaken out here at middleweight and a lot of uncertainty. And in the middle of that, 2 guys I'm not super excited about for stuff moving forward. I think we've seen their ceiling. I think Cannonier can really do damage and scare a lot of the best guys at middleweight in the world. Vettori can, match up really close skill-wise with a lot of the best guys in the world. Just the most time when they're fighting guys in the top 5, they're not going to come out victorious. Or fighting guys that are top 1 or 2 at the very least. Vettori is the minus 125 favorite. Cannonier the plus 105 underdog. Predictably a closely handicapped fight. Let's start with Cannonier. Winner of 3 of his last 4. Wins over Kelvin Gastelum August of 2021 by decision. Win over Derek Brunson by second round knockout and a win over Sean Strickland by split decision in December of 2022. He got outstruck 152 to 141 and taken down once, gets a close decision. His only 2 losses since May of 2018 are to Robert Whittaker by unanimous decision and Israel Adesanya by unanimous decision. And he landed a combined 143 strikes against those 2 opponents. He only got outstruck by a margin of 42 combined between the 2. That's super impressive. And in that stretch, to have wins over Anderson Silva, Jack Hermansson, Gastelum Brunson, and Strickland, very impressive. He was born in 1984. He does have a 77-inch reach at 5'11". Marvin Vettori, 6 feet tall, 74-inch reach, born in 1993, almost a decade later. Winner of 2 of his last 3, 2-2 over his last 4. He was on a 5-fight winning streak going into his rematch with Israel Adesanya that included wins over Andrew Sanchez, Carl Roberson, Jack Hermansson, and Kevin Holland. Then, he thought that he beat Israel with his 4 takedowns and 58 strikes. He didn't. That wasn't how it looked. That's not how it looked statistically. That was not the optics of that fight. But then bounces back October 2021 with a unanimous decision over Paulo Costa, outstriking him 190 to 163, 1 takedown each for the pair. He also his only 2 losses are to Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
In fact, his last 3 losses includes his first loss to Israel Adesanya. These guys have only lost to Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. And Vettori, coming off a unanimous decision victory March of this year, where he outstruck Roman Dolidze, who was well on his way up the middleweight rankings, 106 to 71, en route to a unanimous decision victory. Okay. I believe in Vettori's wins just a little bit less. Like the Hermansson fight was a good victory for him for sure. The Holland fight, taking him down 11 times, and only landing 24 strikes over the course of 5 rounds, that doesn't say a lot for me. And Holland proved to be a little bit of fool's gold as he, got some key wins, but then got exposed by guys who are more well-rounded martial artists and are stronger. The Costa win, do I think that he's going to, land 190 strikes? Do I think Cannonier, lands 163? I don't know if it's like that. Cannonier can hurt him way worse, and Vettori is a little bit more well-rounded of a fighter. I think that if someone gets a takedown in this fight, quite obviously, I think it's going to be Marvin Vettori. If a guy gets knocked out, I think it's going to be Vettori. In a decision, I think Cannonier, even if he gets outstruck by, in a fight like Sean Strickland, 152 to 141, or, against Kelvin Gastelum, he lands the more meaningful shots that score better. So I don't think anybody gets knocked out in this fight. Derek Brunson is a different case for where he was at. I think if someone gets a knockout, it's Jared Cannonier. Marvin Vettori, just him being in this fight makes it very likely that it's going to be a unanimous decision one way or another. That's how his last 6 fights in the UFC have gone, and the 2 before that broke up that streak. He's been in 4 5-round fights over that stretch. Cannonier's been in 3 himself. You understand why it's a very close matchup. I think you kind of got to go, can Cannonier avoid? He got taken down 3 times still by Derek Brunson. That does concern me. Vettori is not he's in a better physical and muscular peak than Derek Brunson was when he fought Jared Cannonier. I think Vettori, if Brunson can get the 3 takedowns, I think Vettori can get at least 2, maybe even 3 or 4. He might not do a lot with it on the ground, but I think when it's on the feet, it's going to be even enough. And Vettori's strong enough, athletic, and explosive enough to where I think those strikes could mean enough with the control time I think he's going to have. So Vettori at minus 125, I think he wins this fight like 55 to 60 times out of 100. So at minus 125, I don't hate that. That's a good value. I don't hate Jared Cannonier at plus 105 either. Watch for line movement there. Watch to see if you can get Cannonier at a better value. Even plus 110, you take it. And prop-wise, you go Vettori by decision, plus 100. That's how he wins this fight. So you're getting him at just a slightly better price to win. I love it. Hit it. It's his best prop. And you could go Cannonier by decision, plus 300. Never mind. That is the much better value, actually. His best prop is by decision, plus 300. By TKO knockout, being the guy that I think is capable of doing that in this fight, plus 275 isn't horrible. It helps that it's going to be a 5-round fight, too. He gets more time, but he's going to be spending some of that time on his back, I do believe. So this fight goes the distance. That's minus 170. And either of these guys by decision, those are their best props. That's an incredibly close fight. I have to favor Vettori overall, but Cannonier might be giving you better value prop-wise. And folks, that is it for UFC Vegas 75 coming up this weekend, Saturday at 7 p.m. Hopefully I'll be able to be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord doing the DFS and sports betting weekly chat at some point throughout the afternoon and the evening. Like I said, I will be traveling to Florida this weekend and coming back the weekend after. We have a lot of exciting interlude episodes coming up. Check out my USFL gambling content. The last week of the regular season is this weekend, and then we move on to the playoffs. Every game this weekend has postseason implications. Tune in. Check out who's going to cover, where you're laying points. Check out the USFL, a great American product. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for all kinds of sports content and my picks for organizations like Bellator, PFL, One, Ryzen, Fights in Boxing, LFA, anything of interest. That's where you'll find it. Follow at Tap That MMA Podcast. Follow and like the page on Facebook. Go to YouTube, like, subscribe to at Tap That MMA Podcast, the channel. Go to Spotify. Do all that too. Folks, thanks so much for listening. We have another fight night. We have an action-packed week of mixed martial arts. Put your money down on it. Have a great weekend. Don't call 1-800-GAMBLERS. Control yourself. Have a good evening. Thanks a lot. Peace.